Welcome back to the PT Graduate Podcast. My guest today, Mr. Ian O'Dwyer. G'day, OD. How are you?
Rich Ellis, how are you, my friend? I'm very well. Glad to be on in this beautiful sunny day. I must admit, in the South Island of New Zealand, Bannockburn. It's 0 to 6 today, so it's fresh, but the sun is beautiful.
Excellent. Fantastic. It's similar up here, not quite as cold, but similar conditions. You know, the sun is doing its thing. So, so it's quite a crisp, beautiful winter.
That's what we want, mate. That's what we want, that sun to shine, that beautiful vitamin D.
Absolutely. Puts a smile on the dial. I probably didn't have enough space for all the notes that I needed to take to talk to you today because you could go down any rabbit hole and find out so much about you. So I've kind of just got a few bits and pieces, and I think we'll just see where it goes. But fair to say that Phil Soma is really the majority of your focus is Phil Soma. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Rich. Phil Soma is really the 30 years of being in the industry. And, you know, when we look at it, the reason I put it into something like this is because Phil Soma stands for self-osteo-myofascial applications. In other words, it's a self-care tissue management system. And I guess for us, Rich, is that everywhere I go, whether it's here, Australia, US, UK, Asia, it doesn't matter. Everyone I know that's in the industry has some form of pain or discomfort in their own bodies. And we're the ones who are coaching people to hopefully be out of pain, right? So it's interesting, mate, because I needed to design something that would help me because I do body work and I do movement and I do performance and I do recovery. As you know, play is a big part of my bag of tricks. And the thing is that, you know, we all get to that stage where we need some sort of care. We need someone to do some work on us. And because I look at the body a little bit differently, probably a more inclusive look at the body, I find it very hard to find people who do the same thing that I do. So therefore, I had to devise, applications with rollers and balls and whatever I could find to help me get the tissue change needed. So Phil Soma now, you know, I'm really now focused on trying to help people help themselves.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. And because it is so different, or sort of certainly different to the mainstream way of doing things from a gym point of view, an exercise point of view, how have you found that working in terms of helping people understand the importance of what you do? Because it is important, but it hasn't always been on people's radar.
No, Rich, and that's, you know firsthand, excuse me, you know firsthand because you're in the trenches with me, trying to coach people to open their perspectives, to give them solutions, not answers, because you and I both know there's no answers out there. Unfortunately, every human being is different. But there are some fundamentals that we can actually anchor to that we can then start to evolve and start to create solutions of. So it's interesting because initially, Rich, you know, I'm different, and I probably didn't realize that early enough in the industry that we're in. And what I mean by different is that I had all the injuries under the sun, and the conventional or traditional methodology that we used wouldn't solve those problems. You know, I stretched, I rolled, I strengthened, I did stability work, and I'd go out and play the sport, and I'd break down. And then I'd go back and I'd stretch and I'd strengthen. So I did the same protocols based on the best conditioners in Australia, the best physios and allied health professionals. And they were doing nothing wrong because they were following the research of the time. But what I soon found out, well, when I say soon, found out over a period of probably 15 years, is that my tissue was very different to what traditional people were. I didn't have tightness. I had the bendy tissue. I could sort of move lots of areas. So stretching for me was a no-no. As soon as I stopped stretching, I stopped getting injured. So it created an inquisitive nature in me to find out what else weren't we addressing. So what's interesting now is that I guess if I put it into a clock and I put in the center of the clock and we put, you know, wellness in there, or, you know, longevity or tissue health or whatever you want to label that one, and you have these 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock circles around that clock. The first one you go is, okay, So what does Feel Soma address, or what have I had to address with my clients over the years? Well, inflammation was a big one, had to address it
Mm.
in myself. Mental, emotional issues, had to address that in myself because of the fact playing sport, as you know, a very emotional area when you get broken and you get, to the stage where you're
Mm.
not playing and you get back into the side. Are you going to be broken down?
Yeah.
Are you going to have a contract? Blah, blah, blah. So the mental, emotional capacity is really important and major. And disease. Rich, you and I are seeing more and more disease in our
Mm.
industries now than ever before, whether
Mm.
they're, irritable bowel, whether they're, more chronic diseases, whether they're, cancer's diseases. We're seeing that now, and we're having to be able to deal with people, to help people deal with those issues. So that was the first thing that I had to sort of look at. And then the next bit was, okay, I want people when they walk out of my environment, my studio, I want them to feel revitalized. I want them to be happy, and I want them to have a smile on my face.
Mm.
And that sort of sounds like a day spa when you think about when you go to those sorts of
Yeah.
situations, how you come away from them, right? But if you can get people putting a smile on their face during this session and when they leave, guess what they want to do? They want to come back,
Come
right?
back. Yeah.
They play and, all sorts of restorative sort of applications were really important. And then, of course, you got down to that number 6, down to the bottom of the clock, and we looked at that and we said, okay, we've got to get people to make better decisions. We've got to get people to be able to perform. We've got to get people to be able to mimic their sport and not break. Well, that's really just performance, okay?
Mm.
It's
Mm.
efficiency in movement so that the person doesn't just play one game, they play a great season. And then they don't play one season, they play 10 great seasons. So creating tissue health, creating performance, and then creating tissue sustainability. And of course, finally, if we go up to 9 o'clock, that last segment, Phil Soma really sort of, the focus was I want to empower my clients with the best information that I could so that they make an informed decision. And if needed, I've got education that they can go and actually do online. There's an online immersion they can do because a lot of my clients have actually done it because they want to know more
Yeah.
about how they can self-care.
Mm.
So it's been an interesting path, Rich. I haven't
Yeah.
always had the clarity of that to be able to explain it like that. But it's interesting now, not being in my studio and focusing more on Feel Soma, I can actually identify those areas of helping people that have been really important over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like that's your business model, essentially. That treatment
Really
model was what you bring to the client, and they'll need more or less of those different components depending on where they're at and what they need.
correct, mate. And as you and I both know, we've been in the industry a long time, Rich. I'm not going to say how
Been
long,
a few
but we've
years.
been in the industry a long time, and we've seen lots of things come and we've seen lots of things go. And at the end of the day, I feel one of the biggest things we've probably missed as coaches, trainers, whatever you want to call yourself, in the early days was we wrote programs and those programs were pretty rigid.
Mm.
We now look at the individual per session, which is
Mm.
very different to what it used to be. So that, when we write a program, it's really no more than a guide, as we know. And we have the ability now, that's what I love about what you guys are doing, is the fact that you're creating opportunities that if this doesn't fit, do this. If this doesn't fit, do this. If this doesn't
Yeah.
fit, do this. So we can progress an exercise or regress an exercise, and there's a positive experience for the client, which
Mm.
is all we're looking for, because that positive experience creates the ability for the person to smile and then want to come back next time.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. Having more tools in your toolkit. And you're right. I think that seems to be a bit of a trend that I've noticed talking to trainers is they don't have people walk in and do what they've already written down. They have them walk in and then go, okay, based on what you've just told me and that little check-in, we're going to do that, or we're going to do this, or we're going to throw that whole thing out the window and do something completely different. So I think we're responding as an industry, and we're getting better at, like you say, treating not just the individual, but the individual on that particular day for what they actually need, as opposed to what our template says they need.
And the hardest part was, I guess, we've never been taught that. That's instinctively or intuitively what we've done ourselves over the years, and we've seen that it works. More importantly, we see that now, if we don't implement that, clients don't come back. Because if
Yeah.
we're training a client who's had depleted sleep, or we're training a client who's got an emotional stress or stressors in their life, or we're training a client who's dehydrated, we know that their tissues aren't going to withstand force. So if we put an overload of tissue stress into the tissues, they're either going to inflame, well, that's one of the very first things we spoke about, or they're going to break. Either way, we don't want any of those, because when we then get to a stage where a person's broken, now we've got to try and build the trust and rapport again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's understanding on a deeper level where their body is at, and helping them tune into what that feels like, because some people are more disconnected to their bodies than others, right? So you're helping them along that journey without preaching, so that you can have that conversation and they can go, I'm here and I think I need to do this instead of that.
It's interesting, Rich. We look at it now and we have these things and we say that we're more connected than ever before, right? And yet we've got amazing technology out there that tells us about heart rate variability, and it tells us about our heart rate, and it tells us about our sleep and our cadence and our distance and blah, 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 which is fantastic. But that's creating disconnection, right? Because we're now taking something that isn't about us. It's actually an algorithm based on a number of people, and your average doesn't fit that algorithm at a certain level. Now, I've got nothing against technology, but what I do say to people all the time, please take note of how you feel. Because at the end of the day, the research is showing that the rate of perceived exertion is far more accurate than any type of tech that we wear. But we've probably become, through the media, through social media, through magazines, we've probably become very programmed to being told what exercise to do, what diet to go on, when we should sleep, whether we should fast, should I do aerobic or anaerobic training? Should I lift? There's all these things we're getting told, and it just gets, I don't know about you, but it gets bloody confusing. Like I went into a gym last night. I was in Wanaka, took my daughter across to ballet, and it must look funny because I just go in. I have my water bottle. I've got my little miniature percussion gun that I do some work on my tissues with. I've got a ball that I do some specific, fascial work on.
Yeah. And
then I start moving. And it's funny because everyone's got their phones and looking at their. I'm like, mate, I don't take a phone with me to a gym. I go in there and I want to move, right? So whether it's a whether it's a dumbbell, a Viper, whether it's a barbell and we're doing whatever, but I just think, wow, if I took my glasses, if I took my phone, I've got to take my glasses. Where do I put them? I've got to wear them when I'm exercising. So it's kind of funny, mate. It's you look at all of the people in the gym, various ages, various trades, obviously various occupations, and headphoned up, looking at a device, and I just think, wow, okay. I actually go there for the fact that I just want to be.
Yeah, we've outsourced that intuition. We've neglected it, and on many levels, like you say, you got the algorithms for the movement stuff. You've got, when you should eat, and we have hormones to do that for us. We just have to stop and listen to them. But we've sort of lent on that tech so much that we're more disconnected from our bodies than ever, and that's not the answer to fixing some of our problems.
It's kind of funny. There's an old saying that if you want to know how to fix a child, you ask a mother. And it's so true, right? When you were sick as a child, would your mother take you straight to the doctor? No, she'd probably make some homemade broth or chicken soup or something that would nurture you. She'd keep you in a warm room. She'd measure your temperature by putting her chin on your forehead. She'd give you a hug and reassure you. And that was all done off how she felt and what she felt that you required, right? She used your immune system. She used your nervous system with the temperature. She used all this biofeedback that was actually sitting in front of her.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny, mate.
It's so true.
And it's not all. Sorry, buddy.
No, sorry.
I was just going to say, we've got all this information sitting right there, and yet we've almost become non-trusting of what we see, what we feel, to make a decision, which to me is a little bit sad,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but we've got a family story, similar story. When my son was very young, he had a blind pneumonia,
Oh,
and
wow.
went to the docs because obviously he wasn't he wasn't well, and the doctor sent him away. And my wife was like, "No, this isn't right." Got to Starship. When the nurses realised what was going on, everybody changed behaviour. Like they doubled their pace, and just a classic example of that intuition, and just being so aware of what's going on with somebody else and their body when you're that well connected to them.
Absolutely. It was interesting. I had a client a number of years ago now, and had a heart rate monitor on, and I didn't use heart rate monitors that much, I must admit, but I did use them. We had a system in the studio that you could see the heart rate monitor, and his heart rate wouldn't get over about 130. And he was saying, "I'm not, you're not training me hard enough. You're not training me hard enough." I said, I don't think that it's the amount of force we're putting into your system. I believe you're stressed. And I believe you're stressed almost to the verge. I would like you to go and see a doctor. Anyway, he did, and basically had a bypass within the week.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting, mate, that, because we say that if someone's heart's going to blow up, it gets to 190, 200. No, sometimes it won't get over 130, 120, because it's in lockdown, it's in meltdown. So it's looking at the signs of the person in front of you. It's trusting your gut instinct. People say to me all the time, well, how do you know? And I said, well, okay. And I did this with my daughter last night. I said, she said, Dad, when you say, how does it feel? Why do people look confused at you sometimes? And I go, well, I said, unfortunately, so we don't allow people to feel. We like to have things to tell us. The phones tell us what time or what day it is. They store our numbers for us. We don't even remember phone numbers. I said, we've got this innate ability now to rely on other things. And I said, so if I walk up and I shake your hand, and I shook it really softly, like a fish, and I said, how's that make you feel? And she said, oh, yuck. I said, now I'm going to shake your hand. And I shook it. She said, yeah, that's better, Dad. It was just really funny. Like, she's a 10-year-old kid, right?
Yeah.
But it's that whole sensation of, if you walk into a room and you go, this doesn't feel right, or this person I'm talking to, I haven't got a good vibe, you just listen to it, because it's so important. We're nothing more than energy, Rick, right?
No, that's it. It's just that sixth sense. She's clearly a smart girl, because she not only picked up on the fact that you're asking that question, but she's noticed their reactions as well.
Well, it's kind of funny. She probably gets as smart as my mum, if I'm truthfully, mate.
Fair enough. We've talked a little bit about what's going on with the industry, and we're not actually serving. We certainly haven't historically served our customers very well, our clients. But what other things do you think's missing? I mean, I remember when you were in Noosa, I don't know how long ago this was. You changed your setup. You had some equipment in there, and you decided that you were going to get rid of that equipment and sort of freestyle it. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but
2002, Rich.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. A while ago.
Yeah. I went to the States for a conference, and I had a studio that was 70 square meters. So it was petite, like it was a boutique studio, but we'd have 4 trainers in there at times, plus maybe 1 or 2 clients per trainer. So you'd have anything from up to 13 or 14 people in a room, and it worked beautifully, right? But I went to the States, and because I had conditioned myself, like most people have, in a very traditional one-dimensional motion, very chest press, lat pull down, leg extensions, hamstring curl. Not saying that's wrong, just saying that's how I conditioned myself. Now, the unfortunate part with that was that didn't really make sense to me, because the more I did that, the more injuries I got, because it didn't really relate to my sport. So what I observed really quickly was, if we're going to condition people to move, we better make movement look like movement, which sort of sounds funny. But, I went down to Cromwell here and watched the rugby a couple of weeks ago, and I just loved it. And to see guys who aren't in the greatest of condition, as in, they're hard workers, they're farmers, they're blokes who come together on a Saturday, so they're not committed 5 days a week professional footballers.
Yeah.
gosh, I was impressed with how they moved, right? And with their tenacity and their team. And it's great, right? Because you get people who are getting behind their town, their club, and they're supporting their community. I love that. And it gives them an outburst of energy and camaraderie.
Mm.
But it was interesting because I've seen a couple of them at the gym, and they're lifting a lot. And you think, wow, I'd love to go over and just say, now listen, I reckon if I did this for you, you could really get some benefit for your game, but also take some pressure off your body in the fact of now not getting compressive forces on the spine or shoulders or knees or whatever. Not my place at the moment. I'm just, I'm sitting back and watching. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. Got rid of the equipment, lost half my clientele, lost most of my trainers because they were very traditional trainers. But I had this open space. And it was interesting because even though it was open, I still had a lot of equipment, sort of tucked away in corners that people couldn't see. I still had lifting bars, and I still had a cable, and I had whole body vibration. And then I had some more functional tools like Viper and Sandbells and, TRX and all that sort of stuff. So everything was there, but it was in a space. And it was interesting, Rich, because that space becomes something that everyone loved, because we started to play more games. And the beauty about play was I could incorporate any sort of tool, whether it be a ball, a dumbbell, a cable. I could bring balloons in, and you could have a number of people doing certain things in a fun environment. Their heart rate might be, in zone 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go back and you put them into an environment of recovery or restoration, and you'd have them in zone 2. So you dare to play down. So the space was, for me, I feel, was important because it gave me space in my mind and it gave me space in my heart just to not judge people in how they moved.
Yeah.
Because what I learned, Rich, was that everyone has a history. Everyone has a story, right? Like played footy all my life, loved my sport, broken leg, knee operations, muscles torn off bones, chronic groins. Would I go back and play the sport again? Absolutely, I would. I loved every minute of it, and it made me who I am today. It's why I understand. But if I looked at some of my movements, people say, oh, yeah, but you move really well for your age. And I go, yeah, I probably don't move too bad, but I know that there's some things that I do cheat really well in that I could probably work on, right? But if I judged it, you'd be saying, well, that PMO is not working, and that glute medius isn't working, and this should be sequencing with that. Hey, you know what? If you have things that have been broken, torn off, distorted, repaired, they're never going to work quite the same again. Sure. So you've got to allow for that, right, mate? Yeah. So the space has been great because rather than putting people in a fixed position or into a limited position, I let them move. It's allowed me to observe better. It's allowed me to become creative in how I program. We spoke about this at the start, and I love the fact that having space means it's just a guide. Whether someone wants to work their legs or someone wants to work their shoulders, with me, they work their whole body every day. Someone move with me, they work their whole body. Yeah, I can focus on their butt, or I can focus on their biceps or whatever. But it's important for me to work them as an inclusive unit because, when you go to the toilet, there's not, your glutes don't say, well, listen, I'm stopping here. You don't need me. You just go to the toilet and come back and put me back on, right? Yeah. Everything has to work together. Everything has to sequence together. Yeah. So for me, if I can get movement patterns back in the body and they move well, and all of a sudden then we can load them a little bit more stability, and that now starts to give it a bit more freedom, a bit more motion, a bit more rhythm. Now I can put them back into whatever force they want to put back into and see success. So it's kind of cool, taking the risk in 2002 of getting rid of all of my equipment from a traditional setup and having space was the best thing I ever did.
Brilliant. Big risk.
And Rich, I will say this, probably wasn't the smartest thing from a business perspective at the time. Sure. If we're talking about income and we're talking about servicing the clients and so forth, because a lot of my clients did like traditional type training, but they liked it because that's all they'd been exposed to.
Of course.
So it was interesting. I had a lady come in not long before I closed my studio 3 years ago now, and 62, really, quite a vivacious sort of lady, and she was just a lovely person. And she said, "How can I help?" She said, "Ian, I want to get stronger." I said, "Okay." So, that term comes out, and instantly you think dumbbells, barbells, cables. Okay, let's do some squats, blah,
Mm,
blah, blah.
mm,
The first question I asked Rich, I said, "Well, what does stronger mean to you?"
mm.
And she said, "I want to be heard."
Say it
And I
again.
thought, wow, I want to be heard.
Ah,
Right. And
interesting.
that was like, that just took the wind out of my sails, because that was
Mm,
not what I was expecting. It just wasn't. Anyway, so I said, okay. I said, if I just imagined for a minute and said, okay, so you want to be heard. Now, if I looked at the body as I do now from an inclusive manner, and I said, well, okay, your tongue's really important to be heard. She said, well, that makes sense. And I
mm,
said, but if I follow the tongue down now in a dissection, and I know that the tongue connected to the heart and lung, I know the tongue's connected to the diaphragm, to the pelvic
mm,
floor, and it goes all the
mm,
way down to your toe. And she goes, wow. And I said, so when you speak, I wonder whether you butt grip, whether your pelvic floor tensions, whether you stiffen your feet, or whether you're relaxed and you're connected. And she
mm.
just smiled. She said, no, when I go to say something, I can feel my heart racing. I can feel my tissues tension.
Interesting.
So it was really interesting, Rich. We did
Mm.
2 facial mobilizers, a breathing technique with those movements. I never saw her again. She rang me 3 days later, and she said, my husband and I have never been better. Our conversation is so much better. She said, I can't thank you enough.
Wow. Wow.
And Richard, look, it blew me away, right? It blew me away. But as you and I both know, all we're trying to do is we're trying to help trainers and coaches make better decisions, not for their clients, but for themselves.
Mm, mm,
So if we can ask better questions when we're with people, and if we can listen, I think that's the key. We have, 2 ears
mm.
and one mouth for a reason. If we can listen and just gather as much information as we can without interrupting and butting in, and because I've done it, I've been very, I'm so keen to help people.
Yep. Yep.
But it was interesting because even then, that was a lesson for me again, how important it is to make sure that we're speaking the same language.
Mm, mm. And it wasn't the response you were expecting, right? That probably hasn't ever come across before, and so
And
it's a bit
who
left.
would have thought, Rich, who would have thought that a simple breathing technique, a low speed, low force movement that helps you connect your big toe right up to your tongue,
Mm,
would have thought that would have made her feel stronger? And she sends me a text. I'm still doing the exercises. And you think, wow, that's pretty cool.
brilliant, brilliant.
Pretty
That's
cool.
it. So she's kept to the regime, so it keeps providing her the strength that she needs. Brilliant,
Yeah. And
brilliant.
she loves gardening. She's always outside, and she's doing her stuff. She's strong. I could see she was active and she was strong, mate.
Right.
So, you know, intuitively, I just asked a question that I
Mm,
felt I had to be clear on.
mm, mm,
And I'm
mm. And that again, that's so important, isn't it? In terms of going back to the what's missing and what are we getting wrong, really properly listening, like you say, 2 ears, one mouth, and giving people
Yeah,
space.
yeah. It's interesting, mate. We work with a company called the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I went over to their first conference ever, which was 2002, and that's when I came back from the States and redesigned my whole studio.
Mm,
But it was interesting because of the fact that, they were then run by a guy called Rodney Corn, who's the co-founder of Feel Soma with me. Rodney and I have become best mates, been best mates now for 20 plus years.
right.
Anyway, what was interesting about it, Rich, was, in their overhead squat assessment, which is one of the,
Mm,
most world-renowned manuals in the world in ASM, they used to say if the knee drives in, you've got tight adductors, you've got weak glutes, so therefore we're going to roll the adductor, we're going to stretch the adductor, we're going to strengthen the glute, and
mm,
the knee will line up and stack up, and everyone will be happy. And as I said, Rodney's part of he's a co-founder of Soma. He and I have traveled the world together many times. And, it's interesting because he said, little did we know back then that if you've had an argument with your partner, that will disrupt your emotional status, which affects your emotion, which then can do all sorts of bits and pieces, whether it drives your knee in, or whether your butt doesn't sequence like it should, or whether your diaphragm now just collapses because you're trying to protect, whatever, which has a knock-on effect, as we both appreciate. So it's really important now, I love to move people and I love to ask questions whilst I'm moving them, just to see if what they're telling me is congruent to how they're moving.
Yes.
No judgment, just a way of gathering that information.
So I remember you saying at one of the conferences, motion is emotion.
Yeah, motion can be changed by emotion. And it's as I say to people instantly, if you stand up and just be aware of where you are when you stand, if you took your shoes off and just feel your feet, and you're going to feel different weight in different parts of the feet. And if you just gently and quickly, don't judge yourself, just come through your body, up through your legs, up through your hips, up through your trunk, up through your neck. Be aware of what's happening in your body. What's your body position like? Do you feel like you're open and strong and upright and got space? Or do you feel that you're compressed and you're heavy and you're coming forward and you've got brain fog? Now, people would say that's posture. I would say that's a body position, because if I gave you $1 million check right now in that position, what position do you reckon you'd go into, Rich? You would be right? We all would be. Absolutely. Absolutely. Or because I gave you a piece of paper with a number written on it, which had nothing to do with creating strong postural muscles in the back and activating your glutes and blah, blah, blah. But by the same token, if I gave you some tragic news that was about your family, your body position would become even more noticeably compressed and heavy and lethargic. So, emotion can change motion instantly. And that's why, as I say, to everyone I do, I use play a lot, because play is a way of creating a safe, non-judgment, enjoyable environment that allows people just to move within their threshold. It doesn't tell them how to move. It doesn't tell them how to sequence. I was just reading something yesterday, and it was, and I've heard this many times, and I could never find the reference, and I've just found the reference, which is great.
Brilliant.
Karen Purvis is the lady's name, and it's about she's involved with child development, and it talks about the research on repetition and teaching a muscle to work properly again, and it takes between 400 and 500 repetitions.
Wow.
In play, it takes between 10 and 20.
Really?
Yep.
Good grief. That's not even close.
Rich, I have never, and I'll say this out loud, I probably wouldn't have said it in my early days, I have never done the same exercise twice in a rehabilitatory program. Never.
Right.
Because I don't believe the body's that dumb that we've got to constantly keep putting the same pattern into it. When you look at us in life, you look at us on a footy field, you look at us working, ploughing a paddock, you look at us, it's when we do dumb movements like sitting, and we've got to sit, you and I are sitting here on a computer talking, we've got to sit, right? So the first thing I do when I finish this is I get up and I move in a manner in which it changes what I've just done. I open the body, I do some breathing, I'll sit in the sun, I might even go out and move in the sun, 3 minutes. And all of a sudden, the energy, the clarity, the body says thank you, the fluid moves, you make it inflammation. So it's kind of interesting. It's something that, I didn't start playing because I was that smart. I started playing because I got bored, and I didn't like going to the gym as a semi-professional athlete, because every time I went, I got broken. I thought there's got to be a better way. And so when I started introducing play, and whether you want to call them drills, I've used many names over the years, because people go, well, I don't like play. Okay, I want you to do this drill, and this drill is going to activate your butt, and it's going to actually give you a bigger chest and stronger shoulders. Oh, okay, no problems at all.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they start to laugh, they start to sweat. They go, God, that's harder than I thought. And it might be with a 3 kg.
Yeah.
But because you're doing stuff in, different planes, directions,
Mm.
distance, the body's
Mm.
going, wow, this is challenging. A bit like hanging off the monkey bars years ago, right, mate?
Exactly. It's all 3D, isn't it?
All 3D, mate. All 3D.
We shouldn't stop playing on the monkey bars. That's the thing, with all the kids are doing all the right things instinctively, and then we narrow our scope and our field of vision in terms of how we move as adults.
And what do we do now? We're seeing people now. They want to get back to hanging and doing climbing and stuff, which I think is fantastic. But they've become so deconditioned that they can't do it.
Yeah.
It's like it's interesting. It's like pickleball. Like pickleball's it's one of the fastest growing sports in the world.
Yeah.
Highest injury rate in the world.
It's sad, isn't it?
Now it's on a small court with wooden paddles, and you would think that it would be fairly safe, but it's getting back to that tissue stuff that we spoke about before, mate, isn't it? So we make muscles strong, but when you've got to react fast, it's actually not the muscle that's going to necessarily be the key element. It's going to be probably more the fascial tissue, and we're going to do that tensile type of training to make sure that the tissues are conditioned to take that sort of force. So it's just interesting, Rich. It's the things, as you say, hopscotch, monkey bar climbing, poison ball, British bulldog, all these games we used to play that were really about, having to move, using all our senses. This pack animal will get around us, we laugh, and we're getting people out of the way. We really should never stop doing that. We really shouldn't.
No, I went back to tennis a year or so ago after not playing it since I was 11 years old, and it was it's been a really interesting journey because the first few months was really uncomfortable. My hip was sore, my knee was sore, but slowly but surely I've been, looking after those areas, but it's got better and better and better. And now the benefits of the multi-direction on the tennis court is spilling over into other things, which I've noticed. So, we need to keep mixing it up and changing what we do all the time.
It's kind of funny, mate, isn't it? I mean, I'm like you. I've loved tennis, and I haven't played it for a long time. I've gone back. I was doing some work with a guy who's a very good tennis player, tennis coach in Noosa, and I was doing some work with his son, and he said, "Ian, come down, and I'll give you a couple of lessons." I didn't want to charge him. The kid was a great young boy, and I coached him in football. Anyway, so I went down and had probably 3 or 4 lessons, and so much has changed: the grip, the stroke, the follow through. But really, what it's about is that community feel, right, Rich? It's we try to create something that allows people to become part of our tribe. And tennis is so good because you can go down for a whack, you can go down and be competitive. It's entirely up to you. But the biggest thing, as long as when you go down, that you can actually move safely, right? So, rotator cuff tears and rolled ankles and, lower lumbar problems and all that sort of stuff. And it's generally just because we haven't conditioned the tissues to be able to do it. So, such a great game, such a great game.
It is. And I read some research the other day about the whole hand-eye coordination thing is, we probably know this anyway, but there's more research being done about how critical that is for the grey matter, foot, hand, ball, just, constantly working those areas and coordinating them.
And it's interesting, mate, because it's, I suppose back in 2005, 2006 now, my constant term was rhythm and timing. Everything's about rhythm and timing. Because everything I looked at, whether it was tennis, football, soccer, rugby, it didn't matter what it was. Michael Jackson, you've got someone who could dance. Their rhythm and timing was phenomenal. So if we can get the optimal ability to move everything, like, I can tell you from losing an eye at the age of 3 or losing it at the age of 5, cutting that when I was 3, but losing an eye, starting to play Aussie rules, being a natural right footer, and then realising that wasn't going to work because this was my blind side and this is where I was getting hit. So I had to learn how to kick the left foot. Okay. So my left foot became as fluent or more fluent than what my right foot did, right? I was more comfortable on my left foot. And it's interesting, mate, because that's what taught me about tissue adaptation, tissue, adaptability. And that's what taught me about rhythm and timing. So when I see someone who's mishitting a ball, or I see someone who's miskicking a ball in Aussie rules, and you see them that the ball's fading or pulling, or they're not quite hitting the spot, pretty much straight away I can say, right, okay, your pelvis is jammed up, or there's something that we go to, and pretty much straight away you can change it, instantly. And it's just the rhythm and timing, right? Because our sequencing slightly out.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, that's right. We get those imbalances between left and right side, don't we? And our bodies get used to it, especially with those one-sided sports.
Absolutely.
As I always do, I ask my guests for some top tips. And I think you've dropped in quite a number of top tips as we've gone through, which I
Sorry,
think...
Rich, I'm stuck.
No. Well,
I've stuffed up your sentence.
No. It's good. I mean, well, I'm picking them up, so I think they're probably lessons that I would had to observe. But any others? I mean, obviously you've been in the industry a long time. You've got a wealth of massive body of work and a wealth of experience, and you're very generous to share that at conferences and give people a taste of what you do and how to work with clients. What other things have stood the test of time for you in terms of, from a business point of view or a practice point of view?
I think, having a business, I had the first personal training studio in Noosa on the Sunshine Coast in 1999. So I bought that off Richard Boyd, who, we've been mates for years, and Richard went off and started PT on the net, and he was the CEO of PTA Global. And it's interesting because of the fact that, the one thing I believe that is important for people to do is just focus on what you do and how you do it in your own business. Don't be focusing on what the gym down the road's doing or the personal trainer up the street's doing. Just focusing on you. Do the fundamentals incredibly well. If you do that, I can assure you, if you do the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are this, the fundamentals are: know your values. For me, it's easy. I've got 3 values that I practice every day. Positivity, I'm a team player, and trust. If my clients don't have those 3 values, I don't work with them. If I do business with someone and those 3 values are there, I don't work with them. Because if you can't trust me and I can't trust you, our relationship's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
I'm a team player. It's not about me. It's about them. I want them to get the benefit. I learn as much off my clients as they learn off me. So, in the positivity, it's funny. My blood group is B positive. So it's kind of funny, Rich. I got some ordinary news this week. My number 5 brother has a. We thought he was going into rapid onset dementia, and we found out yesterday he's actually got 2 brain tumors, and they're inoperable, and he's going back pretty quick. But where I tell you that because of the times that we've had together as a brother, he's been amazing. I mean, he sat beside my bed when I lost my eye. Like, he had to sit in the hospital for weeks with me. The things that you take away from adversity is critical. They're lessons. They're there for a reason. And that's the thing I think, Rich, about, you and I and Dave and a number of people in the industry now who I really see who are helping shape New Zealand really positively. It's the people who can, what I call, they've got grit. They hang in, right? There's lots of stuff out there, and normally the times you learn the lessons are when it's not pleasant, right?
True.
So, don't worry about the person down the road. Make sure you do the fundamentals well and understand your values. You do that, you're going to have a really, really successful career, mate. Fantastic.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been great chatting. Could have carried on, but, I don't want to hold you up. I know you're traveling tomorrow, so I'm sure there's plenty more to do.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, Rich. Good to talk to you, buddy.
Cheers.